Okay, so I've just been distracted slightly by more people joining the waiting room. There we go. So my purpose today is not to teach you NLP, because obviously I can't do that in 30 minutes. I really just want to make the case for you, spending a bit of time to find out more about what I think is a fantastic subject. You know, I've been working with NLP for about 30 years. So, you know, you can tell I think there's something good here. If you have questions, what I'd like you to do, if you would, is to put them in the chat box when you think of them. And then I've allowed a bit of time for questions at the end, and then I can go into the chat box and go through the questions and answer. Now, if you're the kind of person who was sort of thinking, right, I'm going to kind of sign into this and I don't really want to participate in anything, I'm happy just to kind of sit back and listen, that's fine, because that's what I'm intending for this session. But I would like to ask you a little favour. Unless you're kind of, you know, eating your lunch or engaged in something you really don't want to be seen doing, would you put your camera on, please? Because it makes a world of difference to me if I can see some faces on the screen. You know, if I'm just looking at black boxes, it's nowhere near as interesting as if I can see that there are actually some people out there. Yeah, great. Thank you very much. That's really nice. I feel like I'm talking to some real people now. Good. So let's have a look at these 6 things you probably need to know about NLP. So I'm going to go back to my slides just briefly. Here we go. So number 1 is it works, and that's proven. Now, if you've come across NLP in the past, and you know, let's face it, it's not new, it's been around over 40 years now. One of the criticisms that was leveled at NLP in the early days was that there was no scientific proof that any of it worked. So I'm really happy to be able to tell you that now we do have scientific proof that a lot of the techniques work. And I'm saying a lot of them because, of course, every little piece of NLP has to be scientifically validated independently. There isn't a sort of, you know, you can't do a study that goes NLP as a whole works. And the reason why we have that scientific proof is largely down to individuals who've been willing to undertake, you know, proper scientific study. And that's been helped also by advances in neuroscience and things like MRI technology, which means that, you know, at a scientific level, you're kind of getting a window into how the brain works and how different things happen in the brain in response to different thought patterns and different experiences and so on. And that's enabled people to shed a bit of light on, you know, what goes on with some of these NLP techniques. So I'm profoundly grateful to all the people who've done the hard work and have produced those wonderful, you know, peer-reviewed, proper scientifically validated studies that say, yeah, this stuff works. I mean, you know, I can say from my experience of, you know, 30 years working with NLP, I know it works, but, you know, actually having the scientific validation is a great thing as far as I'm concerned. So that's the first thing. The second thing then, NLP is a set of practical skills that anyone can learn. I'm going to come off the slides for this. So if you wanted to learn, say, to play a musical instrument, what would you do? You'd go and get lessons, wouldn't you? You know, what would you do if you wanted to improve your golf or your tennis or something? You'd probably go to a coach. And from time to time, I meet people who say, oh, yes, NLP. Yeah, I know a bit about that. I've read a book or two, you know, and that's great. And that will give you some information, but it probably doesn't really enable you to actually do it. And those results that I showed you at the beginning of the session about the amazing things that people have done through the application of NLP, you know, that comes from actually doing it. And so like any set of skills, you know, it doesn't happen overnight. You know, it's not a kind of miracle. It doesn't just, you know, suddenly you can do all these things. You know, it takes practice, it takes time, you've got to commit to it. So any one aspect of NLP, you know, you can master that with, you know, a bit of diligent application to, you know, to get mastery across a whole suite of different techniques and so on. You know, that takes time. Most of the skills are mental skills. So they're about learning to use your mind in a different way. It's about choosing what you think about and how you think about it in different ways that will usually get you either more choice or more effective outcomes. So knowing about NLP is never going to be enough, because it's a set of practical mental skills. So it's about learning how to do it. Now, if you're willing to play for a few minutes, I'll give you an example of this. And this is not a whole NLP technique, it's just a little snippet. Yeah, but if you're willing to play along. So what I'd like you to do is cast your mind back. Can you think of a time in your past when you had a bit of a disagreement with somebody and you were absolutely certain that you were right and they were wrong? Can you think of a time like that? Okay, so if you can, then the next step is I'd like you just in your mind's eye to take yourself back to that incident. So imagine that you're there, you're reliving it, you know, you can see the other person in front of you, across the table, the other side of the room, wherever they are, and see all the other stuff going on around, you hear the sound of their voice, you know, and maybe you get a bit of that feeling of righteous indignation because you're right and they're wrong. Yeah? So just get into that for a moment, feel what that's like. Okay. Now, here's something that, you know, you might do sometimes, but maybe you don't. But what I'd now like you to do is to imagine that you could detach yourself from your own body and your own feelings and your own thoughts and go around the other side of the table, be the other person. So go and inhabit their head for a few moments, yeah, and find out what it looks like from their side of the table. You know, well, there's somebody that's other side of the table a bit indignant because they're convinced they're right, and so you can see that, you can, you know, hear the discussion and notice from this perspective, you know, what's important to this person in this situation, what's going on for them, what's most interesting to them, how are they feeling, what are they thinking. So just take a moment and experience that. Okay, good. Now come back round your own side of the table, come back to being yourself. This is always a good practice, always come back to being yourself. And just go into that situation again and notice the other person, see how you're feeling, how you're thinking, what's going on. Yeah. Now, would you just give me a little thumbs up if it feels a bit different or it looks a bit different or it just seems to have shifted slightly when you came back to being yourself? Yeah. And give me a double thumbs up if maybe you're not quite so certain as you were that you're right and they're wrong. Excellent. I'm seeing quite a lot of thumbs coming up. Brilliant. Well done. So that's an example of what I mean by mental skills. And the more you practice seeing things from somebody else's perspective, the easier it gets, and also the more accurate it gets. So that's an example of a mental skill. Some people, you know, find that quite easy to do. Some people find it harder to do. But with practice, anybody can master it. So that's my second thing that you probably need to know about NLP, is that it's a set of practical skills and anybody can learn it. Okay. So number 3 is that it's not therapy. Now, again, there are connections between NLP and the world of therapy. And if you know anything about the history of NLP, then you'll know that it started out in the world of psychotherapy. And the people who developed NLP, you know, were initially using these practices in a clinical setting. They kind of worked amongst themselves and practiced together. And then, you know, when they had something that they were confident had value, then they would go and introduce it into a clinical setting. So lots of people make that connection, think, oh, you know, NLP, it's about therapeutic change. And the answer is, well, yes and no, but you know, what I do is not therapy. So the distinction is that in the therapeutic world, you're working with people who basically are having difficulty functioning. So they're finding it hard to do normal everyday things that you and I take for granted. You know, sometimes simple things like getting out of bed can be really hard for somebody with a mental health issue. And so in the beginning, NLP techniques were used to help people, you know, become more functional, to be able to overcome whatever was holding them back, and, you know, restore the ability to function in normal everyday life. Now, what I'm doing, and what my team do, and lots of other people who teach NLP and use it now, is that we're starting with people who are functional, people like you, who are doing very well, thank you very much. And we're applying the NLP techniques so that you can become even more successful. So you're refining your ability to do things. You're becoming more effective, more efficient. You're finding better ways to achieve what you want to achieve. And so it's the same kind of structure of patterns, but because of where you're starting from, you're getting different results. Yeah. So we're not talking about therapy, although NLP does have applications in the world of therapy. What we're talking about is personal performance. And NLP is probably the best way I know to help somebody overcome a hurdle that's getting in the way of them doing their best and achieving a goal that's really important to them. So that's number 3. The fourth thing then is it gets results quickly. And I mean really quickly. So having said, it takes time and it takes practice and all the rest of it. If you're in a coaching relationship with somebody who uses NLP, then you can get a change in a thought pattern or a behavioral pattern or something that's not working for you. You can get a change in that really quickly. Often, one session of up to an hour or so, can give you the kind of shift in what's going on inside your head to allow you to go forward differently. Let me give you an example of this. There's a lady who came on a course a long time ago now, but it stuck with me because it was such a great example. She was an area manager, and one of the things that she obviously did was a lot of traveling. This is, long before the pandemic. And she said, I have a bad habit that I don't record my mileage. And so I get to the end of the month and I have to put my expenses in, and then I've got to go back through my diary and remember where I've been, and then I've got to work out how far it was. And she said, it's a long and boring process to figure out how much mileage I've done to claim my expenses back. And she said, what I really should do is I should just track it as I go along. But somehow, even though I know that, it never happens. Now, I'm sure you can relate to this, either for yourself or people that you know, that deciding to do something and wanting to do something isn't always enough to actually make it happen. Yeah. You've got examples of that, and whether that's I'm going to do more exercise, or I'm going to stop drinking so much coffee, or I'm going to go to bed early, or whatever it is, I'm going to clear my emails every day. We can all have good intentions, but turning those good intentions into good activities isn't always that simple. Now, there's an NLP technique known as the new behavior generator. Does what it says on the tin. And so this particular lady who was the area manager, she worked through that process. I think it was probably one of the demonstrations that we did in the class. And thereafter, it became much easier for her to get in the car and record her mileage every journey that she did. So when she got to the end of the month, it was a really simple matter to do the filing of her expenses, which of course is what you want. You want to be able to get through tasks like that as quickly as possible. So when I say it gets results quickly, that technique maybe takes 20 minutes to do, once you know what you're doing. And once it's done, it stays done. If you've used some of the traditional methods for personal development, for changing habits and so on, you'll be familiar with the notion of repetition, that you have to keep doing something over and over and over and over again until it sticks. When I was growing up, people used to say, it takes 6 weeks to make or break a habit. And I believed that. I had no reason not to, until I learned some NLP. And then I discovered that, it needn't take that long. That actually, if you're clear about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and you use the right process, you can get a change that sticks from one intervention. So it's a bit like, if you open up your laptop and you look at your home screen and you kind of go, I'm bored with that wallpaper. So you go into your settings and you pick a different photo and you change it. Now, you'd be really surprised, wouldn't you, if you opened up your laptop the next morning and your old wallpaper was there and you had to go and change it again. You'd be really surprised at that because you've changed it, so it stays changed. Yeah. And using NLP techniques is often like that, that when you make the change, whatever it is, stays changed, which is great news, and that's why I say it gets results quickly. And I think this is one of the reasons why the business world initially got quite excited about NLP, because it enables us to facilitate behavioral changes. And if you're involved in L&D in any way, you will know the holy grail of L&D is getting people to change their behavior. You can put people through training courses, give them all the information and knowledge that you like, but if people come back to the workplace and don't do anything different, then it's just been a waste of effort on everybody's side. So actually being able to get changes in behavior is really important. So that's number 4, is we get results quickly. Now I'm just going to go back to my slides for this because I want you to see this one. It's important. So we've done number 2 and we've done 3 and 4. Number 5, NLP goes down well with technical professionals who want to understand people. So I've just been talking about, it's a bit like changing the settings on your computer. People who have a technical facet to their work, people who like things that have structure and process, usually really like NLP. Well, I'm sure you can see the reasons why. We've done a lot of our best work with people who do technical jobs, either IT or engineering or finance, things where you need a lot of information and there are rules and systems. And at the same time, you have to be quite creative in order to get the results that you want within those rules and systems. Yeah, and just see a show of hands, who actually works in a technology-based organization. Yeah, quite a few of you. Yeah, so this is relevant, and we've worked a lot with people who are the IT professionals, but increasingly we're getting people coming to us who are managers and leaders in businesses that rely on technology, but they don't actually have a technical background themselves. And people are starting to realize that entire businesses now are completely dependent on technology, that everything that happens in your organization usually is touched by technology somewhere along the line. I know there are still some jobs where you don't need technology in order to function, but they're getting fewer and fewer. And so most of us, if the IT fails, we fail. And what that means is that your business is dependent not on the technology, it's dependent on the people who manage and run the technology, the people who make the decisions about the technology, who move things forward. And so, building the bridges between people who have very technical roles, and I would include not just IT, but I would include things like finance and law in very technical roles. Building the bridges between those people and the operational people and people with different specialisms is really important. So, we think NLP works really well with people who have that sort of, technical frame of mind, because it makes tangible something that perhaps has been a bit off-putting for them because it's so intangible. If you go on a leadership development program and people, talk about, oh, well, you've got to create rapport and you've got to be authentic and all this kind of thing. If you don't know how to do that, it can be a kind of dispiriting experience. What we can do with NLP is we can look at what are the actual behaviors that make a difference in the workplace. What are the things that you can say and do that will improve your engagement with other people, will improve your relationships with your suppliers and so on. And it gives some kind of tangibility to things that might have been off-putting because they were a bit nebulous. So that's another reason why I think it's useful to know. And I would always advocate, if you're going to spend time and money training people or training yourself, you need to be clear about what the end result is that you want and how you're going to know when you've got it. Because all too often, people waste time and they waste energy, they waste money going through training programs that don't actually make any difference to what anybody does at the end. And after I spent most of my life in learning and development, so I have strong opinions about all of this, as you might imagine. But I think it's such a shame, because most people actually enjoy learning given the right opportunity to do it. Okay, I get off my soapbox. So the 6th thing that I think you probably need to know about NLP is that if you do decide you want to learn it, then if you come to Brilliant Minds, you can learn it in a peer group. Now, the reason I say this is that NLP has long been associated with personal development. And, way back when I first started learning NLP, I was in a huge group of people. I think there were 60 of us in the group. And people were there with so many different agendas. So there were people who were there because they had trauma in their background and they were looking for new ways of, managing their own experiences and, sort of healing themselves. And there were people there because they were coaches and therapists and counsellors who wanted the NLP toolkit, so that they could do a better job for their clients and patients. And then there were people like me who were, wrestling with problems in the corporate world. I went to learn NLP because I was working in an organization that I felt was really dysfunctional, and I didn't know how to have the influence to make a difference so that, we could go forward in a much more productive way. And that's kind of what drew me to learning NLP in the first place. And, sometimes it's nice to have a variety of agendas. Some people find that really stimulating because you're always going to learn from other people in the group. But, if you're the kind of person where you think, actually, I'd quite like to be there with people who I've got something in common with, then that's definitely something I can offer you. Most of the people who train with us come for business reasons. And that doesn't mean that it's not about personal value, because, if you've been subscribing to my mailing list for a long time, you probably heard me say, if you want to be a better leader, then work on yourself. So, NLP is one way that you can also work on yourself. But sometimes we joke, you look around the training room and I'll say, oh, we've practically got a board of directors here, because we might have a head of sales and a head of marketing and a quality manager and a CFO, and they're all sitting there, all from different businesses, but, with a similar sort of attitude to the responsibility that they hold within their organization of wanting to find a better way of doing business and wanting to bring out the best in the people around them. Okay. So, gosh, I'm nearly through my first half hour. That went very, very quickly. So if you have any questions, I've obviously just spellbound everybody because nobody's put a question in the chat box. If you have any questions, now would be a really great time to put them in the chat box so that I can answer your questions. And also, before we finish, the other thing that I'd like to do is I'd like to show you some of the things that you can do if you're thinking, okay, you've convinced me, it is time that I delved into this subject and found out a bit more about it. And I know I'm not going to say, come and do NLP practitioner training, it's 20 days, and because that's probably too much of a leap. Although if you want to, just put it in the chat box and I'll tell you all about it. But I'm thinking it's more likely that you might just want a little sort of place to start. Okay, so do I have the links to the scientific papers? I can send them to you. Yes, absolutely. So Daniel, if you drop me an email, because I know you've got my email address, then I will send you the links to the scientific papers. Paula says, does NLP help you to influence and persuade and understand your own and others' motivations? The simple answer to that is yes. But perhaps I should say a little bit more about that. So a lot of people come to NLP because they want to learn the skills of communication and influence. Often, it's all about, I'm not getting what I want from other people, or it's taking too long. So how can I do better at persuading and influencing other people? And so, yes, absolutely, we can apply NLP thinking to achieve that. I think what you've said there, Paula, is the other part of the story, which is really important, which is about understanding your own motivations and understanding your own patterns and preferences. Because in just the same way as we all have our own habits, there are habits and routines that develop between people. So, you might have had this with somebody that you work with, either in a good way or not such a good way, where you start a conversation and you think in a certain way and the other person comes back at you with a different way of thinking, and that takes you somewhere else, that and it's sort of a bit like a sort of to and fro of a ping pong match. And if that's a constructive way of working for you, that can be really powerful. But if it's you having a bright idea and the other person saying, oh, that won't work, then that can actually get quite destructive quite quickly. And so one of the things that you will come to realize quite quickly when you start working in this way is that sometimes if you change the way that you do something, it frees up the other person to do something different, because it's like playing a game, and if you don't make the first move, then they don't have to counter it. So the point that you do something different, it opens up the possibility of other people doing different things. So yes, you definitely can learn to influence and persuade, and at the same time, you know, raise some awareness of what's going on for you and how you can harness your own motivations and, you know, channel your behavior in a way that's going to get you the results that you want. Thank you for the question, Paula. Anybody else? Have I stunned you all into silence? Okay. So if you're thinking, right, okay, so where do I go from here? How can I learn a bit more? So yes, there are courses that you can enroll on. And what I've put together as a real kind of starting place, and I am just calling it the NLP Starter Pack, is an online package that you can access, which gives you answers to questions like, well, what is NLP and how does it fit with neuroscience and mainstream psychology? It tells you about different types of training. There's a whole section which is basics of NLP. So the sort of stuff that I would do on the first couple of days of an introductory course. There's, you know, it's there in video form or things for you to read and so on. There's a whole piece which is a program that we sell as Your Brilliant Mind, which takes you through some of the fundamental principles about how we look at the way people interact with the outside world, how their perceptions are formed, and how that then has a consequence in the way that we use language and how other people respond to us. So that's all in there as well. And what else is there? There's information about courses. Oh, and further resources. So if you want a reading list, if you want my take on which would be some good books to start with, that's all in there as well. And as a final piece, if you want to, you know, take on this pack, you also will get a free one-to-one with me. And that's an opportunity then to say, okay, I've watched some videos, I've read some of the stuff, I've interacted with this, I've had a go at some of the things that are in there, and now I've got some questions for you. So that's your opportunity to get some answers directly from me. And, you know, if you like to experience firsthand a little bit of NLP type coaching. So that's all available in the pack. Now I've got another question coming. This is from Susie. Do you think NLP can help you better guide people through an organizational change they may be resistant to? Oh yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. There's some great stuff that we've done helping managers and leaders introduce changes into their organizations. Most recently, I did quite a big session with yes, it was Hewlett Packard Enterprise, HPE. And in the UK, their pre-sales team had done a reorganization. So whereas their technical experts had all been aligned with products historically, so, you know, I'm the expert in this server and I'm the expert in that system and so on, they decided that actually it made far more sense for them to be aligned to markets, and that they became much more customer oriented. And the director said to me, I know this is the right thing to do, but I also know that we're not going to get any benefit out of it unless people start doing things differently. And he said, I don't know how to do that, but I'm told that you do. So that's why I'm here. And so, you know, so we did some work together. And there's a number of different things really. And one of them is about understanding how different people react and respond to change, because some people quite like change and other people don't. And there's, you know, and there's all points in between. There are people who love change. There's, you know, it's people at the front of the queue every time you want to do something. Oh, me, you know, and I learn it first, you know. And there are other people kind of going, not in a month of Sundays, you know, I'm not going there. And somehow, you know, you want to bring these people through a process of adopting the new system, the new process, the new behavior in a way that works for them. And what we really don't want to do is sort of inflict it on people and kind of get into the state of, you know, you will do this because I'm the boss and I say so. Because, you know, we all know that doesn't work, don't we? So what NLP enables us to do is to kind of get below the surface and understand a bit more about how a person embraces change, at what speed and in what way, so that we can then make it possible for them to take on the changes in their own way. So yes, absolutely. And if you've got a specific scenario that you'd like to talk about, Susie, then feel free to get in touch and we'll have a chat about it. But thank you for asking. So that's, I think that's one place where we can really make a difference, and especially at the moment, because people have been through so much, haven't they, in the last couple of years, and actually it's not just people at the coalface. It's often the leaders and managers in a business who have really taken it on themselves to figure out, how do we make this work? And they've been battling all the time with how do we look after our employees? How do we make it possible for them to work? How do we also look after our customers if everybody's working at home? And often, it's the people in senior roles like yourselves who've taken the brunt of this. And I think we're at a point now where it would be good just to kind of stop and take stock a little bit and go, right, okay, so what's really important now? Okay. You can see people are starting to drop away. So let me go back to the slides so that I can show you how you can get your hands on my starter pack. So I've done a rubbish job of using all my slides. Here we go. Right. So if you want to get started learning NLP, the NLP starter pack, it's mostly video based. So there's 22 videos in it around different subjects. There's a couple of audio sections. As I said, the entire Your Brilliant Mind program, including the free coaching session. There's a 29-page ebook about the presuppositions of NLP. And there's a module from our program, which is called Use Your NLP, which is actually a revision program. But the particular module that's in there is one that I think is so useful that I thought I'm sure you can make use of that. And there's answers to questions as we go along and a narrative to guide you through it. So the web address is at the bottom of that slide, and I will put that in the chat box as well in a moment so that you can pick it up from there. Similarly, if you don't take it down and you don't get it, whatever, you can always drop me an email. It's diane@brilliantminds.co.uk and I'll point you in the right direction. So let me come out of sharing my screen and I'll just pick up that link and put it in the chat box for you. There you go. So you can click through from there if you want to. Yes, right. Okay, so we've got another question come in. James, any tips or resources for NLP for kids to help with exam stress? Yes. Where's James? Give me a wave. Hasn't got his camera on. Okay, so there's lots of different things that you can do. I would recommend look up a technique called the Circle of Excellence. So you probably find it on the web. It's also, if you've got a copy of my book, Introducing NLP, then it's in there. It's a really simple technique. I have done it with teenagers who had exam stress. I don't work a lot with young people. It's not really my field. But I have on a couple of occasions had somebody say to me, my teenager's really stressed about exams. Can you help? And we've used that technique. It's simple to do. It's easy, and it really will make a big difference. Okay. Anything else? The web link you posted hasn't appeared in the chat. Right, okay. Thank you for telling me that. Let me have another go. I think somebody had sent me a direct message. So I need to do this to everyone. There we go. Can you see it now? Because somebody give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for pointing that out. So, okay, any final questions before we wrap up? Good. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure. Lovely to see you. If you're coming to the next webinar, which is on Tuesday, it's at a slightly earlier time. It's at 11:30. And I confess that's because it's my mum's birthday and I'm taking her out for lunch. So I'm doing this one a little bit earlier. And we'll be looking at 4 different ways that you can get results in business with NLP. And I'm intending to share with you some real life examples of specific things that people have done with NLP that made a difference in their working life. So hope to see you there. enjoy the rest of your day.